So happy to be here this morning. I was just going to read some bios. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So very distinguished panelists this morning and amazing bios. So to my immediate left, your immediate right, Mr. Bill Jewell, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Chief Information Officer. He leads the organization's technology and information security programs. In this role, Bill focuses on building, securing, and maintaining technology platforms and services that enable the Chamber to thrive. Previously, Jewell served as the Chief Information Security Officer and the Vice President of Technology at the College Board. There he built and led an information security program designed to protect the data of over 100 million students, parents, and educators. Jewell oversaw security engineering and operations, architecture, policy, vulnerability management, application security, and cyber defense. He was responsible for infrastructure engineering, workforce technologies, corporate systems, including financial customer relations, human resource management applications, and earlier he led the College Board's data management and governance teams. So Bill earned his undergraduate with honors from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, a Master's of Art with distinction from Georgetown University, and a CISO certificate from the Heinz College at Carnegie Mellon. He graduated magna cum laude with a JD from the Georgetown University Law Center. Let me introduce Mike and then we'll welcome our panelists. Mike has over 30 years of information technology experience. He currently leads the Smart Technologies practice for Network for Future, NFF. From June 2016 through 2022, Mike served as a Chief Technology Officer for Stafford County, Virginia. We heard a little bit about that. At Stafford, Mike focused on broadband expansion and co-founded the first of its kind Smart Community Testbed. We just heard about that too for the Commonwealth. The Virginia Smart Community Testbed was launched in May 2021. Mike was also the Chief Information Officer for the International City-County Management Association from 2013 to 2015, a nonprofit organization serving over 10,000 members in local government management. Prior to joining ICMA, he served 14 years as the CIO for the city of Rockville, Maryland. And in Rockville, he developed and implemented 2 IT strategic plans and was responsible for building the city's first institutional network of fiber connecting cities' facilities. Mike has completed numerous consulting engagements for county and city governments over the past 2 years. Please join me in welcoming these highly distinguished and esteemed panelists. So this is how it's going to go this morning. As a warm-up, if you will, I'm going to ask each of our panelists one question, and that question is going to be tailored to their unique experiences and their skill sets and what they do now. It gives all of us a chance to get to know them a little bit better, and it gives them a chance to insert information in their bio that is important for you to know and that I may have neglected to mention earlier. And then after those warm-up questions, we're going to move into sort of a round robin. I'll ask a couple questions to both of them and ask for responses. At that point, we'll open it up to the floor. Okay, got it? So, Mike, I'm going to start with you. And sort of the 500-pound gorilla in the cyber community right now. And talk a little bit about your experience as a CIO and CISO at the local government level with respect to election integrity and election infrastructure and security. So the organization I work for, DHS, CISA, and the FBI just published a joint announcement, a public service announcement, guaranteeing that the election infrastructure is safe and secure, but we do have to worry about denial of a service attacks at the communications and reporting side of things, worried that perhaps adversaries will delay reporting or confuse reporting, causing misinformation. So I'm curious about the local level, and more localities, of course, are running their own elections at the local level, and state governments oftentimes pass down requirements to the local level. And I'm curious about the cybersecurity measures that are in place to protect elections integrity and security, and you know, kind of the benefits and the complexities of the approach of being handed requirements and perhaps capabilities through the state level to the local government.
Sure, okay. And not to date myself in any way, but back in the days at the City of Rockville, first election that I was involved in running, we were using punch cards, believe it or not. And there was no hanging chad. It was a mechanical punch. So luckily it wasn't like what happened in Florida. But things have come a long, long ways. And Maryland in particular, since I had probably my most experience there, we had to go through all sorts of challenges with voting machines and Windows CE operating systems, if you remember that, and with Diebold and a whole lot of other technologies. But all of this was really being driven at the state level. We were the ones administering the election, but we had to follow state procedures. And in the case of the City of Rockville, we also had to follow what the county mandated, Montgomery County. We had our own election, we had our own local election, but we still had to follow that. Now moving on to Virginia. Virginia's taken some big steps in terms of helping to ensure a secure election. One of the things is essentially an audit that every local government has to go through to make sure that their systems are secure that are running the election. And it's an onerous task, especially for the smaller localities. And if you look across the Commonwealth of Virginia, you've got some localities that are very, very small. We're talking populations of less than 10,000, and that they may only have one IT person, or maybe not even an IT person running things. So those are the areas where I think there's the biggest, risk or challenge. Now you can argue, well, those aren't a lot of votes, but every vote does count. And so one of the things is local governments have had to respond to a lot of the requirements that have come down from the state and follow those guidelines. Come election night, though, there's always going to be a surprise. There's always going to be a challenge, but hopefully you can respond and resolve those issues before they make the newspaper and the election goes smoothly and the counts are correct. But there's always going to be a surprise of some sort, but it's usually a small, minor thing that gets resolved. But I don't want to alarm you all. I think election integrity is really strong in the U.S.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Mike. Bill, I'm going to go a little bit more broadly in general here because just getting to know you, I didn't understand the importance of your role in the Chamber of Commerce, or how the Chamber of Commerce sort of interacts with businesses nationwide. So I'm curious and hoping you can sort of introduce how the Chamber of Commerce supports the missions and advocates for businesses. What specific cybersecurity initiatives can the Chamber undertake, right, to help its members protect their digital assets and prevent cyber attacks, and ensuring business continuity, if you will?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. For those of you who don't know, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is the nation's sort of largest, widest reaching business advocacy organization in the country. We represent businesses from the Fortune 50 to the 500 to small businesses, tens of thousands of small businesses across the country. And they all have very different needs. And we have, we believe, we represent them in areas of cybersecurity, AI policy, energy, transportation, right? The whole sort of gamut. So my role at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as CIO and Chief Information Security Officer is to make sure that we, internally, that we are operating soundly. We are allowing everyone to do great things with data and to thrive, but to do so in a secure way. The Chamber itself is a very strong advocate for having sound, harmonious policies, not just at the state level, but at the federal level. We think there's like a very strong and compelling reason why the U.S. should have stronger federal policies to harmonize them across different states, right? Most of the businesses that all the businesses in the Fortune 500, most large businesses operate in many states. And it is, the United States has not done a great job in creating federal policies around things like privacy or cybersecurity. And the states have taken a really strong lead in those areas, and that's fantastic. They needed to. The result, though, is for someone who is dealing with a multi-state business, which most are, they are dealing with different policies and different rules and different requirements when they state by state by state, and that generates a significant amount of confusion and inefficiency at times when efficiency and clarity are probably most important. So that's one of the areas that we really believe quite strongly in and advocate for. We also know that all of these policies are extremely important to keep us safe. And it's we want to make sure that business is at the table for those conversations, because those are the ones doing the work to make those systems sound and secure, and so that those rules and policies become very smart in the way that they protect individuals.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to turn to ransomware attacks, right? So another kind of hot topic in the community. And I'm thinking specifically about an alert, again, that came from one of my sister organizations at DHS, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, earlier this year about Phobos. Right? So Phobos is a ransomware as a service provider, targeted the IT systems and of municipal and county governments, emergency services, educational institutions, public healthcare systems, and other critical infrastructures. So ransomware as a service allows those with minimal, technical expertise to launch ransomware attacks using these pre-developed tools, sort of democratizing them to the general community. So I'm going to go to Mike first. What lessons can state and local governments learn to enhance their strategies for preventing, mitigating, and recovering from ransomware attacks? And what concrete measures can be implemented to strengthen their cybersecurity posture?
Well, I'll start from the regulatory side. So obviously there are a lot of regulations in place in terms of reporting data breaches, reporting attacks. Both the state, I believe things have to go to the Attorney General of the state if there's a data breach within 48 hours. Also, CISA requires a reporting as well if there's a breach. So those are things that happen, but you really have to have a plan in place and understand what measures you're going to take when there is a ransomware attack. Most localities have cyber insurance. Those are, and lots of private sector companies do too. And there are a lot of requirements that they are imposing on organizations. For example, there's a city in Virginia, I won't mention their name, but they got a 40-page questionnaire from their cyber carrier with all these new requirements that had to be met before they could get their policy renewed. There's also the need, back to the ransomware though, you have to know who's going to make these decisions. Most of the time it's going to be the elected officials, but sometimes the insurance company wants to drive this. So you have to understand, what the roles and responsibilities are. And if you're going to pay the ransom, who is going to negotiate that? Most often the insurance carrier is going to have their own negotiator that's going to negotiate this. Fortunately, I've never experienced a ransomware attack, so knock wood, I never had to deal with it, but I've talked to enough folks that have, including Baltimore, Atlanta, and others that have had the most famous ones you've probably heard about in the public sector.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Bill, same question to you with a little bit of a twist on, what role does the Chamber of Commerce play in helping private industry adopt strategies for preventing, mitigating, and recovering from ransomware attacks?
I mean,
Yeah.
the the chamber does a lot of work to educate people about these things, including mainly a lot of the work in the area of small business, because they sometimes don't have the same level of resources that larger companies have. Let me take the first part of your question, though. Delegate Maldonado ended her discussion with a really important phrase, which is what happens to one of us happens to all of us. And I think that sets a really nice context for this conversation. The idea that ransomware as a service now exists, and that there's now millions of people who can launch ransomware attacks, whereas before there might have been thousands, is just one small part of a much bigger threat landscape that we all face. And there are very, very large companies that deal with things every second of the day, and there are very small companies that are dealing with things that without the same number of resources at all. And that's why this group of people representing state and local governments is just as critical to that role, right? They don't have the same type of resources that giant companies would have to stave off attacks. They have to be smart, and you have to make strategic investments, knowing that there are hundreds of vectors of attack that are available to now millions of bad guys out there. There's not enough that you can do. There's not enough that anyone can do to guarantee safety of every single one of those vectors. So you have to make smart decisions about what you're going to protect the strongest, and figure out ways to isolate those other things, right? Like you have to make choices, right? I mean, we do at the Chamber of Commerce as well. The biggest thing that I will say is that the most important thing to me, and the thing that I feel really deeply passionate about, because what happens to any one of your states and cities can be the bad guy can pivot and attack other states and cities, can pivot and attack other companies, other people. Outages in one vendor, as we've seen in the last weeks, months, and years, have critically damaging effects across the entire country and even beyond sometimes. We saw it with CrowdStrike, which wasn't a security incident, but it was it acted in ways similar to it. We've seen it with any number of other things just like it. Ransomware as a service is one thing. There are 10,000 things that we know about and another 100,000 things that we don't. And the best thing that I think people often overlook is just make sure you are absolutely testing your systems against real life scenarios. It's hard to do, and it's sometimes expensive to do. It doesn't have to be as expensive as it sometimes seems. Do red team activities. I'm not talking about tabletops. Tabletops are very, very good. I'm not talking about pen tests. Pen tests are very, very good. You have to know how your systems are going to work, but really see how your systems are going to respond against real actors. It's hard to understand how important that is, but it is so common to see people doing what they think are all the right things. They've covered all the controls, right? They've checked all the boxes. But this one thing that's an outlier that they don't even know about is sitting out there somewhere that you from the inside trying to assess and secure can't do it because you don't have the visibility you need. The more you can try to simulate something real, learn from it, respond, learn from it, improve, the iterative cycle of security in real life scenarios is in my opinion, one of the most important things CISOs, CIOs can do at a very practical level.
Thank you, Bill. So you raise an interesting and great point. So in my last job before I joined DHS, I was the senior advisor for software and cybersecurity to the director of operational test and evaluation in the Pentagon. So that meant I was the last person in the Pentagon to do a review of the cyber testing that has taken place on, F-35, satellites, missiles, what have you. And we have red team, right, emulating the threat to do those tests. And now at DHS, we're not responsible for the cybersecurity of weapon systems, of course, but we are in charge of cybersecurity of critical infrastructure, right? So I think back to one of the capabilities we had in the DoD and wonder about its ability to also help in the DHS space and at the SLED level. It's particularly, right, because we understand that the private sector, small businesses don't always have the resources they need to be able to do these kinds of tests. So one of the capabilities we had in the DoD was the National Cyber Range. And that National Cyber Range helped us do really elegant, sophisticated red team testing in a virtualized way, right? So we were able to create virtualized models of the software, perhaps digital twins of the hardware, and throw pretty sophisticated high-level red teams at these to ferret out vulnerabilities early in the design process, which would have a little bit different flavor than critical infrastructure, because our critical infrastructure, most of that's legacy. But I'm wondering, if there was an investment, a broad government investment in this kind of capability, where we had a national critical infrastructure range, would that be of use to the state and local governments? Would that be of use to private industry who can't afford these investments on their own, but maybe they could bring, virtualized models, digital twins of their infrastructure to this range, have it tested, again, testing as a service, if you will, to help them identify those vulnerabilities and assign the priorities and their risks? Bill, first.
I think that anything we can do to make affordable, repeatable solutions to state and local governments, even small business, right? To just, again, to the point, what happens to one person happens to all of us in this space. I can do everything I can to secure my organization, and you can do everything you can to secure your organizations. But if other people are hit, it impacts you, right? We are safe together in this space. And we all need everyone else to do things to keep themselves secure. I think the ability for state and local districts to be able to take versions of their systems and have them tested in real life scenarios like you're talking about at this National Cyber Range, it's a phenomenal resource that people should take advantage of. It probably is, there are probably elements of it that feel a little mystifying. And I think that the more everyone can do at the federal and the state level to sort of demystify those types of activities and make them feel very practical, the better, right? It's an idea that if you don't do regularly, might feel like a bigger lift than it truly is. And so I think offering it is good, but I think educating about it is just as important, and I fully agree with you.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I would certainly echo Bill's comments there. I think there's a lot that local governments could benefit to have a safe place to test, sandbox to test these things. And now with AI, even more so, there needs to be a lot of testing. And can you do that in your environment? It will depend. So as much as CISA can help with that, that would be a phenomenal thing, I think. One plug I want to make for CISA is it's really important to get to know the folks there. They will, make visits. They will help educate your leadership. They will help in many, many ways that can really make a big difference. And in certain cases, they can even do cyber assessments for local governments and educational institutions. And in Virginia, the National Guard, believe it or not, does that as well. So you can actually have the National Guard come in and do like a 4-day assessment with a whole team of folks in uniforms, and everyone looks around like, what are these guys doing in here with their fatigues on? And you think, oh, there must be some major incident happening here, but no, they're here to help safeguard the local government, and phenomenal service they provide. And unfortunately, funding is limited, so you really have to get on a list and hope that your locality comes up before you miss out on at least understanding where you are with any kind of threats beyond just what you normally do on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks. So one just quick follow-up on these. So from the perspective of industry or state and local governments, these capabilities, whether it's, sending a red team forward to do testing, whether it's having some, capability, sandbox capability to do testing as a service in a different place, are there demand signals? Like, even though it's less expensive for state, local governments, private industry to engage in those kinds of activities, it's not expense-free. So is there a sufficient incentive on the parts of state, local governments and industry to want to engage in that kind of activity if there is, some degree of financial incentive to do that in terms of providing capabilities to these entities, but recognizing that it's not a free ride? Bill?
I'm not 100% sure that I understand the
Yeah.
question. Are you talking about, like, is there a financial benefit? I mean, if you're asking, is there a financial benefit to having a secure infrastructure? I think everyone can agree that there is.
Okay.
I might be wrong about that. I think anyone who has sat in the seat of a CISO or anyone who has had personal accountability for the security of PII or PCI or HIPAA data would say, of course there is, right? That if you've been in those seats, you understand what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, I would just imagine what it's like to know that you are under full-time attack from bad actors of information that, as we just learned about, is wildly valuable, both at a very personal level, as Delegate Maldonado described, and at a financial level, as we heard from the previous panel. So I think that incentive is there. It does not mean it's not. This doesn't mean there's not a competition for funds at in any given organization.
It's fair. That's fair. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, local governments have very limited resources, and a lot of times they have to make tough decisions in terms of what they'll fund. But more and more so, cyber initiatives are at the forefront, and I would say that's probably the number one priority. Had been the number one priority with local governments at the IT level, but maybe AI is a little bit higher priority right now. But I don't think folks have lost sight of the importance of cybersecurity, and most organizations have staffed up and actually have a cybersecurity team, or they've done some sort of managed services with the private sector, and there are just a lot of great companies that do that out there.
Can I just add, so we don't stay on that point, I want to make one other point. It is, of course, I believe, a financial incentive to do these things. It is also a moral issue. I mean, anyone who is in this room cares enough about these topics to understand that we are not just dollars and cents based. We are providing services to our citizens. We are caretakers of their data. We are entrusted with information that has great value and great risk associated with it. And there are times when hospitals who are storing records about what you're allergic to and not allergic to can go down. There are times when transportation systems that are in use can go down. Right? There is a real human element that should not be overlooked in any conversation about this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Thank you. So I had one more question, but in the interest of time, I think we will move to questions from the audience and see if anybody out there has something they'd like to ask our panelists. Please.
I'll go. Beji, I'll bring you the mic so people can hear you. And we maybe have time for one question, and then we're going to transition to your talk. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So on the financials, right? On the financials, can we do something like what airlines do, taxing the passengers like $10 or $8? Would that help with the funding the range?
So to that point, I guess I wasn't so concerned about funding the range, although that might be a model that someone might want to consider. I was more concerned about, is it a if we build it, they will come scenario? Like, are they going to come? And is there sufficient incentive, whether it's moral or financial or requirements-based? Are there sufficient incentives for private industry, state and local governments to use that capability if it existed? Yeah.
And I would say Council of Governments are probably a good way to leverage that too, because then you have a collective of local governments. For example, the Greater Washington Council of Governments includes localities from the DMV, immediate National Capital Region, and that would be as an example of a group that might be interested in partnering with you.
Nice.
Thank you. Let's give it up for our panelists. Thank you so much.